There we go. Oh, there we go. So just to give you an overview of today, in a few moments we'll be joined at 12 o'clock by Laura from Carers Trust. And then we have got representatives from Bromley Social Services and...
Hang on. Sorry.
Hello.
Sorry.
We've got representatives from Bromley Social Services and Oxleas to explain how the process works for carers assessments. And at 12:30, I'm going to share the ways in which Bromley Well can support you. And then we're going to have Emma and Nicola from the advocacy people at 12:45, and then we're going to ask our questions at 1 o'clock. I do have an end time there of 1:45, but it might not take that long, so we're not going to elongate the process for no reason. We will end when we've run out of questions. And I'm going to stop my share. There we go. Welcome, Laura. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, and I'm going to pass over to you now. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Helen. Let me just share my presentation. Can you see that? And is it on the first slide?
Yeah.
It is. Oh, brilliant. And can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. Well, my name's Laura Bennett, and I work for Carers Trust. I'm our head of policy and external affairs, and I'm also a carer myself, and the person I care for has mental health problems. And so whilst we all have individual things that we care for people for, I guess there's a bit of perhaps some common experiences there, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And they've certainly had some blips this year with coronavirus and lockdown and everything. So if you don't know who Carers Trust are, we're a national charity that supports unpaid carers, and we work to improve things like support and services and recognition for anyone who's an unpaid carer. And Bromley Well is one of our what we call network partner members, so local carer services. And last year, through organisations like Bromley Well, Carers Trust and our local services supported over 438,000 unpaid carers, which is amazing, but also we'd love to be supporting more as well. So we recognise that that's not enough, and that there's still more work to be doing. And in my team, the policy team, we influence national stakeholders. That could be people like the government, or it could be NHS, to make sure that what carers tell us they need and what local services tell us they need is what those national services reflect, and obviously with greater degrees of success in some areas. Yeah, so I'll go on to talk about carers' rights and what those mean. So in terms of carers' rights, there are two pieces of legislation. There's something called the Care Act and something called the Children and Families Act. And we've had those pieces of legislation since 2015. They're good pieces of legislation. They put carers on an equal footing with the person they care for. What's not been so good about them, but what we haven't had is the funding to implement those rights. And so that's a real something that we keep talking to the government about, is you've got to give the funding to implement these rights. And I'm aware that with mental health issues, that might mean that some of you have been carers for a long time. So if you were familiar with the old definition of caring, which said that you had to provide regular or substantial amounts of caring, that isn't the case anymore. So all that you have to show is that, oh sorry, I've just realised you might be seeing all of the slides. I'm just going to start from the slide view. Is that better? Can people see a bit better now? Sorry about that. Can't get the staff. So what was I saying? talking about funding, la la la. Oh, I can't remember. I've lost my thread now with that. What was I just saying? Somebody.
The Children and Families Act and carers not having to provide.
Yes, that's thank you. So if you have been a carer for a long time and you were familiar with having to show that you provide regular or substantial amounts of care, that isn't the case anymore. So it's about the impact on you as a carer. So arguably you could be providing, for example, only 1 hour of care, but if that has a significant impact on you, and obviously caring for somebody with a mental health issue where it can be quite intense and quite can be scary sometimes, intense feelings that someone's having can be hard to cope with, that could be something to think about there. And before, young carers, so children under 18, didn't have any specific rights, but they do now. So as I mentioned, the Care Act is a good piece of legislation. Fundamentally, what it gives you as unpaid carers is the right to an assessment of your needs, which should be separate from the needs of the person that you care for. So, which doesn't mean that there might not be an assessment that happens for everybody in the household, and that could be a really good thing. So looking at everybody's needs together. But it does mean that it could be good practice, for example, just to have a little bit of time with you just on your own, because it can be, as you'll know, it can be hard to say in front of the person I care for, actually it's really difficult for me when you're hearing voices, actually it's really difficult for me when you're very down, for example. So to talk about those things in front of the person can be quite difficult. So ideally you'd have some time for yourself away from that process as well. And what the Care Act does is it tells local councils what they've got to do. So this is about your local authority. So that your local authorities, it's if you pay council tax, it's who you pay council tax to, and if you get council tax benefit or housing benefit, it's who you get that from. So in your case, probably the London Borough of Bromley, but obviously I'm aware that borders might work differently. So there might be another London Borough or another bit of the southeast that you might get that from. So as I said, fundamentally carers have got a right to an assessment, and that's about their need. Local authorities have also got to look at what would stop things getting worse as well. So rather than waiting for it to get to crisis point and then looking at what you need, what do you need now that would make things better? They've got to provide information, they've got to provide advice, and they've got to provide advocacy as well. And that's not just for the person who might have care and support needs, it's for you as carers as well. So if you're finding that you're not getting listened to, advocacy doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to take over. It could just be that someone will help you say what you want to say. The local authorities also got to make sure that there's enough services that are there for everybody in the area, so what they need. So for carers of people with mental health issues, for example, that could include commissioning Bromley Well to make sure that there's a support group for carers of people with mental health issues, or that there's a crisis line that carers can call out of hours in the evenings at weekends or something like that. Once you've had an assessment, if the assessment shows that you've got needs that the council should meet, you should then get a plan that's about that. It should be a written plan, and you should be consulted on that. So it shouldn't be something that's given to you and it's go, ta-da, there's your plan. It should be something that you're consulted in. And if you're a young carer and you're coming into adulthood, so if you're 16, 17, you should have what's called transition support as well. So that means that you did get support from children's services, but you're now going to be getting support from adult services. So what can kind of help that be quite seamless and bridge that gap? So if, I don't know if any of you are also have a young carer in your family, so who also might be involved in the care of the person with mental health issues. But if during an assessment there's found to be a child present, then that should look into what more support can be got for the family. And the two pieces of legislation that I mentioned, they work together. This also affects you if you care for your child who has a mental health problem, whatever age they are. So if they're coming into adulthood, for example, that transition assessment that goes from childhood to adulthood, if you're a parent carer, it should look at what do we need as a family when my child was under 18, and what will we need when they become 18 and over. As I mentioned, these rights are good because they do take things for carers forward, and they put carers and the person we care for on an equal footing, which is a good thing. And well-being and prevention are really at the heart of that, so that's a really good thing for carers. Thinking about the assessment, so this is something that any carer can request. It can be done, as I mentioned, it can be done jointly with the person you care for or on your own, but you might want to think about having some time together and some time apart. It's absolutely not about how good you are as a carer, so it's not about assessing how good you are, it's about assessing what you need, if you see the difference. So assessment can make us think, oh crumbs, am I going to be found that I'm not good enough? It's not about that, it's about what you need. And if the assessment shows you've got needs that the council must meet, then the council have got to make sure that you get that support. It's not just enough to say, okay, here's a list of things you could try, bye, sort of thing. I mentioned that prevention's really important, so thinking about how can we prevent carers from needing support. So that could be giving more support to the person who has care needs, for example, or it could be making sure you get a regular break, for example. So how can we stop those crises from developing? Something that's really important is thinking about carers' well-being, and well-being is really broad. So it could be our physical health, it could be our own mental or emotional health. How much control do we feel that we've got in our lives? So can we participate in the work or the education or the training or the volunteering that we'd like to? If we have religious beliefs, can we get to the faith services that we want to, or does caring stop us getting to those? And there's a shift from not just services, but meeting needs. So what are your needs and how can those be met? If you're able to do paid work, you have a right to ask your employer for flexible working. And you also have a right to ask to say that you'll need some reasonable time off for dependents. That's particularly important for carers of people with mental health issues, because obviously sometimes crises can happen and you can't necessarily predict when the person will need your support. So for some people that might be more easy to predict, but for some carers of some mental health conditions that won't be easy to predict. You also have a right to claim things like state benefits. That could be carers allowance, for example, and carers credits. Benefits entitlement is complex, so it's good to get some advice about that. And sometimes you can be an unpaid carer but not be entitled to carers allowance, which can feel really difficult. It's worth noting that one of the things the government did introduce during the coronavirus crisis was, in order to claim carers allowance, you have to be providing 35 hours a week of support or more. And they changed that during the coronavirus crisis specifically to include emotional and mental health support. So 35 hours of providing emotional and mental health support would definitely count. So it's worthwhile thinking, if you've been turned down in the past, you might now be eligible, so that's something to look into. And what should also happen if you get carers allowance is that you'll get something called carers credit as well, which tops up your national insurance contributions, and that can help you later on with things like pensions and that kind of thing. And it might also mean that you'd also be entitled to those kind of other free things like free prescriptions, free dental checks, free eye tests, etc., that kind of thing. So it's worthwhile looking into those kinds of things. Now, what we more commonly hear from carers is that their rights aren't being met. So if you think that that has happened, and you can appeal to the council, so the first thing or to the benefits agency, you can ask them to look at that again. You can make a formal complaint if you weren't happy with that. Once you've made a formal complaint, you can contact something called the local government ombudsman. You could contact your local councillor or your local MP, and there'll be other ways to kind of look at how you can get involved. So for example, I'm sure Bromley Well will be able to tell you how you can get involved with things like carers forums, for example. Local Health Watch might be somewhere that you might want to get involved with as well. And you can also campaign. So if that's something that's of interest to you, please do get in touch with us, the policy teams. That's policy@carers.org. That was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I think we've got questions later on the panel, but I have come in like 3 minutes short, so maybe Helen might let me have like 1 or 2 questions now, so I've got time. I don't know. So do I need to stop sharing? so you can go back to your. Shall I stop sharing, Helen? Would that be the thing to do? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Laura. It was really informative. I think we'll use those 3 minutes and ask you one of the questions that I have, which was, what other support can Carers Trust offer carers? This is adult carers as well as mental health carers.
Muted myself, classic 2020, bingo. Let me just come off mute. So one of the things that we provide to all of our network partner members is we provide grants, for example. So Bromley Well can apply with you for a small grant, and there are different funds that we have available. So some carers have used grants to get themselves things like a laptop, for example, because that would mean that you could keep in touch with family and friends. Obviously, at the moment, it would mean you could do things like online shopping a bit more easily as well. Sometimes some carers have used it for things like buying a new bed so they get a decent night's sleep. Could be getting a decent chair so that you can sit up and do things like read or craft activities or something like that. So anything that would help you feel good or have a break. And we ask that carers apply through a local partner. So in this case, it would be Bromley Well. So you don't apply directly to us for those. Yeah. But there are other grants and things that you could apply for as well if you're not eligible for a Carers Trust grant. We also have other kind of programs that we run nationally. So for example, Working for Carers, you could, if you're interested in getting back into work, that's something that we run, and you can get bespoke support to help you work out how you can get back to work from the Working for Carers project. So all of our London network partners are part of Working for Carers. Yeah, and you'll get things like support, ways to kind of, it might be support with the CV, or it might be interview prep, or whatever it is that you need. And so there are some small grants that are available through that as well. So I know that carers have used it for various kind of like amazing and creative things. So I know one carer wanted to set them, well, obviously this is pre-corona, but you know, if you go to a pub or a club, you see people who are like the registered door people. So they set themselves up, you have to get a license to be one of those people, and so they retrained to do that because that meant they could be flexible with their hours, so that worked around their caring situation, so they could be a door person evenings and weekends, and that worked for them and the rest of their family around caring for the person. Yeah, so it could be, so that's one example, but other people have gone on courses or have bought themselves some computer software. So it's, you know, there are all sorts of creative and kind of flexible things that carers have been able to do with that. I'm trying to think what else we have nationally for kind of adult carers as well. And as I said, there are kind of opportunities as well to kind of, if you'd like to share your story with the media, that's something that we can look into doing as well. Or if you'd like to kind of campaign with us, come and talk to politicians, that kind of thing. Obviously, at the moment, this is all being done digitally. So we're not, all Carers Trust staff are currently working from home, and that would obviously be COVID safe. So you wouldn't need to worry about yourself or the person you care for. So we're not asking anybody to go gadding about into London at the moment, central London.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was
Okay.
really
Almost 1 minute over now.